The night begins quietly, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting to whisper its secrets. Imagine yourself in a place where time slows, and the usual hum of life softens into a gentle rhythm. It is in such a space that mysteries often arise, quietly, almost imperceptibly, calling to the curious mind. On the evening of September 19, 1961, the world seemed ordinary enough. The skies stretched in vast darkness over New England, dotted with distant stars, familiar yet strangely distant. The leaves rustled softly in the cool night air, and the roads lay empty, carrying only the distant sound of tires on asphalt. Yet in this calm, a story was about to unfold, a story that would quietly ripple across decades, threading itself into the tapestry of unexplained phenomena. This story is not one of the flamboyant, immediate spectacles that movies often present. It is subtler, richer, and more contemplative. It begins with two ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that the universe was about to gently nudge them into an encounter that would challenge their perceptions and the imagination of an entire nation. Betty and Barney Hill were a couple whose lives reflected the steady cadence of everyday routines: work, family, quiet evenings, and travel. Yet that ordinary rhythm would soon meet something profoundly extraordinary. Their story invites us not only to witness an unusual event but to explore the delicate intersection between human perception, memory, and the unknown. In 1961, America was in the midst of a quiet tension that tinged even ordinary nights with subtle unease. The Cold War cast long shadows, while the space race inspired both awe and anxiety. Ideas of distant worlds and unexplored skies were circulating not only in scientific circles but also in living rooms, cinemas, and newspapers. Science fiction was on the rise, shaping the way people imagined the stars above them. Amidst this backdrop, sightings of unexplained lights and strange phenomena were both feared and fascinating, blending the ordinary with the inexplicable. For those attuned to the quiet whispers of possibility, the night held both comfort and a subtle hint of wonder, as though the universe itself might pause to observe who was paying attention. As the story begins to unfold, it is important to approach it with both curiosity and calm, allowing the mind to rest in the gentle cadence of observation rather than panic. The events experienced by the Hills would later be described in detail, examined, debated, and recorded, yet it is in the quiet before the revelations that the story holds its most reflective power. The night is a companion to contemplation, and it is under this soft, enveloping darkness that extraordinary experiences seem most plausible, most believable. The senses sharpen, yet the heart can remain at ease, guided by a gentle awareness of both the ordinary and the unknown. This is a story that encourages both imagination and contemplation. The details that follow, drawn from official reports, eyewitness testimony, and careful research, will invite the listener to drift into a realm where history, psychology, and mystery intersect. It is not merely a tale of lights in the sky, but a meditation on curiosity, trust, and the human desire to understand the unexplainable. As the night stretches on, allow yourself to move with the rhythm of the Hills' journey, observing each detail, feeling each nuance, and gradually letting the story carry you toward a quiet wonder. By the time their extraordinary encounter begins, you will already be settled in the gentle embrace of anticipation, ready to listen, to imagine, and to drift into the silent whispers of the night. The early 1960s in America carried with it a peculiar blend of hope and anxiety, a mixture of optimism for the future and subtle tension that quietly threaded through daily life. The nation was racing toward the stars, captivated by the promise of space exploration, yet it was also shadowed by the persistent unease of the Cold War. Rockets and satellites were becoming symbols not only of technological prowess but of a larger unknown, an ever-expanding universe that might hold secrets humanity was only beginning to imagine. Ordinary citizens in towns and cities alike were quietly absorbing these ideas. Newspapers reported sightings of strange lights. Small incidents that might have been dismissed in other eras were now examined with cautious curiosity. In this environment, the line between imagination and reality often felt thin, as if the night itself might reveal secrets to those willing to look upward. It was into this world that Betty and Barney Hill traveled, driving back home from a vacation in Canada, their car moving steadily through the quiet roads of New Hampshire. The couple was unremarkable in many ways, hardworking, devoted to family and community, living lives that reflected the simple rhythms of their environment. Yet it was precisely their ordinariness that made their encounter extraordinary. They were not thrill-seekers or eccentrics. They were people with clear memories, logical reasoning, and a careful attention to detail. This made their later testimony all the more compelling, because it came from witnesses whose daily lives were grounded in the familiar, not in the fantastical. The tension between their normalcy and the events they would experience adds a quiet weight to the story, reminding us that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences occur to those who least expect them. The landscape through which the Hills drove that night was itself a quiet character in the unfolding narrative. New England in September was a patchwork of deep forests, open fields, and gently rolling hills, the foliage just beginning to hint at autumn's arrival. The road stretched ahead under a canopy of stars, punctuated only by the faint glow of distant towns or the occasional passing car. In moments like these, the mind is particularly receptive to unusual sights. Our senses are heightened, our attention tuned to shifts in light, movement, and sound. It is under these conditions that extraordinary events are often first noticed, as the ordinary rhythm of a night drive is interrupted by something subtle, something that demands recognition. The Hills' attentiveness, their calm observation, allowed them to perceive details that might have gone unnoticed by others, a factor that would prove crucial in the unfolding story. Yet the social and cultural context of the era also shaped how people interpreted unusual phenomena. The early 1960s were a time when science fiction thrived not only in literature but in television and film, creating a framework in which strange lights or unexplained experiences could be imagined without immediately seeming impossible. At the same time, public trust in scientific authorities and government institutions lent credibility to explanations that grounded the extraordinary in observable phenomena. The Hills, like many Americans of their time, existed at the intersection of skepticism and wonder, of careful observation and imaginative curiosity. Their minds were open enough to notice something unusual, but anchored enough to report it with precision, balancing the tension between disbelief and recognition. This subtle psychological interplay between expectation and experience forms an undercurrent that flows throughout their account. It is also important to note the personal dynamics of Betty and Barney Hill during this period. Their marriage, by most accounts, was stable and affectionate. They traveled together often, shared opinions freely, and had developed a quiet trust in one another's judgment. This shared framework of understanding became essential during the events of that night. Each would observe, question, and interpret the unusual phenomena in slightly different ways, yet their mutual trust allowed them to navigate uncertainty together. The ordinary intimacy of their relationship provides a grounding element for the narrative, creating a contrast with the extraordinary that makes the story feel both credible and human. Their partnership serves as a quiet anchor, helping the audience to experience the unfolding events with calm curiosity rather than alarm. As they drove, the ambient world seemed serene, yet it was poised on the edge of an extraordinary encounter. The night itself became a companion, a canvas upon which subtle lights and gentle movements would soon leave their marks. It is within this quiet tension, between the familiar road, the distant stars, and the possibility of the unknown, that the Hills' story begins to take shape. Their observations were informed not only by what they saw but by the cultural and psychological context of their era, creating a layered narrative that combines perception, expectation, and subtle awe. This combination of historical and personal factors makes the story feel tangible, inviting listeners to drift along with the Hills, noticing details both large and small, and feeling the gentle pull of mystery as the night deepens. In reflecting on this time and place, it becomes clear that the Hill's experience was not isolated in its context. Across the United States, reports of strange lights and unexplained phenomena were quietly emerging, forming an undercurrent of curiosity and speculation. Yet few had received the detailed attention that would later be given to the Hills. Their journey that night was part of a broader tapestry, a subtle pattern in which ordinary people encountered glimpses of something extraordinary, prompting reflection, investigation, and sometimes wonder. By understanding the era, the landscape, and the couple themselves, the audience can enter a receptive state, ready to explore the events that will soon unfold with both calm and engagement. The evening deepened as Betty and Barney Hill drove south through the quiet, forested roads of New Hampshire, the landscape bathed in the muted glow of a crescent moon. The rhythm of the tires on the asphalt, the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the soft hum of the car engine created a serene backdrop, one that encourages quiet reflection and a deepening sense of presence. Nights like this, unbroken and still, allow the mind to wander while remaining tethered to reality, a state in which subtle changes in the environment can register with unusual clarity. For the Hills, this ordinary drive was about to become anything but ordinary, though at first, it seemed simply a peaceful journey home. As they traveled, the couple noticed something unusual in the sky, small, distant lights that seemed out of place among the familiar constellations. At first, they tried to rationalize what they saw. Perhaps it was a star, a distant plane, or a reflection on the windshield. Yet as the lights shifted, moved, and changed intensity, those explanations began to falter. It was in this gentle noticing, in the quiet attention to the night sky, that the Hills first experienced the subtle tension that precedes encounters with the unknown. Their reactions were measured. They did not panic, but they could not dismiss the phenomenon either. In this calm yet alert state, the mind is receptive, noticing nuances that might otherwise escape casual observation. The Hills' initial observations were accompanied by a mixture of curiosity and a growing sense of unease. They were attentive not only to what they saw but to how it moved, its shape, and the patterns it formed against the black canvas of night. Barney, who had an analytical mind and a careful attention to detail, noted the movement and speed of the lights, comparing them in his mind to airplanes or celestial objects he knew. Betty, with a keen sense of perception, noticed subtle colors, shapes, and the way the lights interacted with the surrounding darkness. Their combined observations created a layered understanding of the event, allowing them to perceive details that neither could have captured alone. This dual perspective adds richness to their testimony, offering the audience multiple angles from which to appreciate the unfolding mystery. The landscape itself played a role in amplifying the effect of the lights. New England's forests, with their tall, dark trees, created a sense of enclosure, a tunnel through which the car moved. The open stretches of road occasionally revealed glimpses of the horizon, emphasizing the vastness of the sky above. In this environment, the Hills' eyes were naturally drawn upward, toward the lights that seemed both near and impossibly distant. The contrast between the grounded, familiar world and the vast, unknowable expanse above contributed to a quiet tension, a gentle awareness that something extraordinary might be approaching. It is within this juxtaposition, ordinary surroundings against extraordinary phenomena, that the mind can most readily engage in attentive observation, setting the stage for experiences that linger in memory. As the minutes passed, the lights became more pronounced, revealing shapes and patterns that defied simple explanation. The Hills reported a formation that seemed deliberate, moving with an intelligence that contrasted with the randomness of natural phenomena. Their emotional responses were subtle but telling. A heightened awareness of the environment, an increased heartbeat, and a quiet questioning of what they were witnessing. Rather than inducing fear, this state fostered a reflective curiosity, a desire to understand and interpret what lay before them. In this moment, the narrative gently shifts from ordinary travel to an encounter that is both intimate and expansive, drawing the listener into a shared sense of quiet wonder. The hill's experience was not instantaneous. It unfolded gradually, allowing for careful observation and reflection. This slow reveal is critical to the story's calm yet suspenseful tone. Unlike dramatic depictions in film, where phenomena appear suddenly and demand immediate reaction, the hill's encounter developed over time, with subtle changes that invited ongoing attention. The lights hovered, shifted, and appeared to communicate through movement and presence rather than sound. In this measured unfolding, the listener can appreciate the psychological and sensory dimensions of the experience, noting how ordinary perception intersects with extraordinary observation. The narrative encourages a meditative focus, allowing the audience to feel as though they are traveling beside the hills, noticing each nuance of the quiet, mysterious night. Alongside these observations, the couple also contended with internal questioning. How could ordinary, rational individuals reconcile what they were seeing with the laws of physics and their prior experiences? Barney attempted logical explanations. Perhaps a distant airplane, a reflection, or even atmospheric phenomena. Betty considered similar possibilities, yet neither explanation fully accounted for the movements and patterns of the lights. This internal dialogue highlights an essential aspect of the hill's testimony. They approached the event with skepticism tempered by attentiveness, creating a balance that enhances credibility. Their careful consideration demonstrates the interplay between rational analysis and the acceptance of mystery, a theme that resonates throughout the encounter. By the time the lights seemed to draw closer, the couple was already engaged in a state of calm alertness. The road, the trees, and the quiet landscape became secondary to the unfolding phenomenon in the sky. Observers can sense the subtle tension in this moment, not fear, but a gentle awareness of the extraordinary pressing against the ordinary. The narrative pace reflects this calm intensity, allowing the listener to experience the slow crescendo of awareness alongside the hills. Every detail, the shifting light, the quiet of the forest, the hum of the car, contributes to a layered, immersive experience that encourages both relaxation and engagement. It is here, in this gradual awakening to the mysterious, that the story begins to fully capture the imagination without urgency, guiding the mind gently into wonder. As the night stretches onward, the audience is invited to notice what the hills notice, the interplay of light and shadow, the contrast between the familiar and the unknown, and the quiet tension that precedes revelation. The journey is as much about perception as it is about events themselves, emphasizing that extraordinary experiences often unfold in ordinary circumstances. By slowing down, observing, and reflecting, both the hills and the listener are prepared to encounter the remarkable without alarm. In this way, the narrative not only conveys the facts of the night but also cultivates a state of contemplative presence, ideal for drifting into the deeper mysteries that lie ahead. As the hills continued along the quiet, tree-lined roads of New Hampshire, the strange lights in the sky began to take on a more distinct and deliberate form. What had initially appeared as distant points of brightness slowly revealed themselves as larger, moving shapes, hovering and shifting in ways that defied ordinary explanation. The first impression was one of curiosity, a gentle awareness that something unusual was present, but as the lights drew nearer, a subtle tension threaded through the calm of the night. The couple, already attuned to the quiet details of the landscape and the stars above, could not ignore the phenomena before them. Each flicker and movement was noted, catalogued silently in their minds, a process that reflected both their attentiveness and the steady rhythm of their personalities. Barney, with his analytical nature, attempted to categorize what he saw. He compared the lights to known aerial objects, recalling airplanes he had seen, celestial bodies, and even distant satellites. None of these explanations fit the behavior of the lights. They moved too quickly, changed direction abruptly, and seemed to respond, almost consciously, to the hill's presence. Betty, on the other hand, noticed subtle qualities, shapes that were geometrical rather than random, faint glows that shifted color, and a sense of structure in the movement. Together, their observations created a multidimensional picture, one that captured the essence of the phenomenon more fully than either could alone. This shared attentiveness would later become a cornerstone of their credibility, illustrating that their experience was carefully witnessed and thoughtfully recorded, rather than impulsively imagined. The lights themselves seemed to possess an intelligence that was both compelling and quiet, a presence that did not shout but subtly asserted itself. They hovered in formations that suggested purpose, moving with a grace and coordination unfamiliar to conventional aircraft or natural phenomena. In some moments, the lights seemed almost playful, drifting closer, then retreating, as if measuring the response of those below. In others, they appeared commanding, remaining stationary while the hills passed beneath them, observing with a stillness that was both unsettling and mesmerizing. The effect was hypnotic in its own way, drawing the couple's focus entirely into the sky while the familiar ground slipped gently into the background. This interplay between the known and the unknown, between observation and speculation, created an emotional texture that was subtle, yet profound, a quiet tension that invited deep curiosity without fear. Physically, the experience also affected the couple in gentle but notable ways. Barney reported a slight trembling of the hands, an increased awareness of his own heartbeat, and a careful monitoring of speed and distance as they drove. Betty experienced a heightened sense of perception, noting the interplay of light and shadow against the darkened trees, the reflective glint on the windshield, and the faint sounds of distant animals stirred by the light's presence. These physiological responses were not overwhelming but added a layer of realism, reminding the audience that human perception is inseparably linked to the body's reactions. The calm but attentive state in which the hills experienced the event allowed for detailed observation without inducing panic, creating a narrative rhythm that is both relaxing and compelling for the listener. Their observations were punctuated by moments of shared dialogue, quiet exchanges in which they compared what each had seen and felt. These conversations were measured and careful, reflecting their deep trust in one another. "Did you see that?" Betty might ask, her voice calm but tinged with wonder. "Yes, it moved again," Barney would reply, his tone steady, analytical. These exchanges not only reinforce the authenticity of the experience but also allow the audience to inhabit the story alongside the couple, noticing the subtle ways humans process the unusual. It is through these shared reflections that the narrative maintains both a meditative quality and a sense of credible investigation, blending the personal with the observational. The environment itself contributed to the sense of quiet mystery. The New Hampshire forest, with its tall, shadowed trees, framed the lights against the dark sky, creating contrasts that were both beautiful and unusual. The road stretched ahead in intermittent clearings, providing moments in which the phenomenon could be observed against open horizons, then partially obscured by the dense woods, offering pauses that heightened anticipation. The natural world seemed almost complicit in the unfolding events, its familiar rhythms juxtaposed against something wholly unfamiliar. For the listener, this interplay between landscape and light deepens immersion, creating a gentle tension that sustains curiosity while maintaining a calm, reflective tone. As the lights continued to move in unusual formations, the hills began to experience a subtle sense of disorientation, not fear, but a quiet questioning of what was possible. How could objects in the sky move with such precision and at such speeds without visible propulsion? How could they hover silently, almost as if observing? This cognitive dissonance, the tension between expectation and observation, is central to the hill's experience. It highlights the human desire to reconcile the familiar with the extraordinary, to find patterns and logic even in the presence of mystery. For the audience, this provides both an intellectual and emotional layer, inviting gentle contemplation rather than alarm. In addition to their own perceptions, the hills would later recall the sense that these lights were aware of their presence, responding to their movements along the road. The phenomenon seemed to interact with them, creating a dynamic relationship between observer and observed. This sense of subtle interaction adds a narrative depth that is rare in most accounts of unexplained aerial phenomena. It emphasizes that this experience was not fleeting or purely visual. It engaged their attention, emotions, and cognition in a slow, deliberate unfolding. The calm pacing allows listeners to experience this awareness gradually, creating an atmosphere of quiet suspense and attentive wonder. By the time the lights had fully revealed themselves in all their unusual formations, the couple was immersed in a state of concentrated observation. The ordinary world, the tires on the asphalt, the hum of the car engine, the distant tree line, receded in importance, allowing their awareness to focus entirely on the extraordinary display above. In this way, the narrative fosters a meditative presence in the listener, inviting them to inhabit the night alongside the hills, to notice the subtle details of light, movement, and response. The gentle rhythm of the story mirrors the gentle unfolding of the event itself, measured, attentive, and profoundly immersive. By allowing space for observation, reflection, and shared curiosity, the story cultivates both relaxation and intrigue, a delicate balance essential for the listener's journey into the mysteries of the night. After the lights had hovered and moved in patterns that defied explanation, the hill's journey continued, but something about the night had shifted. There was a subtle awareness, a quiet tension lingering in the air, as if the world had become slightly altered, stretched between what was familiar and what was inexplicably beyond comprehension. They drove on, their hands steady but minds quietly alert, noticing the way the lights seemed to follow, shift, and respond. At first, they did not fully grasp what had occurred, the experience lingering on the edge of memory, fragmented and elusive. It was only later, through careful reflection and the aid of professional guidance, that the full contours of that night began to emerge. Several months after the event, Betty and Barney sought help from a psychiatrist, Dr. Benjamin Simon, hoping to make sense of what had seemed like a confusing lapse in memory. It was through hypnosis sessions conducted by Dr. Simon that the Hills began to recall the extraordinary details that would later captivate researchers, the public, and cultural storytellers alike. Under hypnosis, Barney recounted vivid imagery of being aboard an unfamiliar craft, described as structured, metallic, and illuminated in subtle, almost ethereal light. Betty's recollections were even more detailed, including not only the environment but also the beings she encountered, their appearance, and their actions. These sessions did not feel invasive or rushed. Rather, they allowed the couple to access memories that had remained inaccessible to conscious recall, revealing a narrative that was both compelling and unsettling, yet recounted with a calm deliberation that enhanced credibility. Betty's descriptions of the beings were detailed yet gentle, suited to the meditative tone of the story. She recalled creatures with large, almond-shaped eyes, small noses, and minimal expression, their movements deliberate and precise. They wore simple, uniform-like attire and seemed intent on observation rather than aggression. The examinations described under hypnosis were clinical and impersonal, focused on measurements and observation rather than any form of interaction that would provoke fear. These accounts, while extraordinary, were delivered with a calm, measured clarity, suggesting that the experience was being processed as an event of profound curiosity rather than sheer terror. The hypnotic recollection allows for a layered exploration, the sensory detail of the environment, the psychology of observation, and the subtle emotions of those experiencing the unexplainable. Barney's recollections complemented Betty's, though his experiences were described with less emphasis on visual detail and more on the sense of being present in a controlled, otherworldly space. He noted a feeling of floating or suspension, the sensation of being watched, and the calm, deliberate motions of the beings around him. Both Betty and Barney recounted the presence of instruments and charts, including a now-famous star map that Betty attempted to reproduce, showing patterns unfamiliar to contemporary astronomy. These elements underscore the extraordinary nature of the encounter, while maintaining a sense of quiet observation rather than dramatization. For the listener, the effect is immersive. The story invites contemplation of a world beyond ordinary perception, without inducing alarm, allowing the mind to explore mystery in a calm, reflective way. The psychological dimension of these recollections is significant. Memory under hypnosis is not perfect and is subject to influence, yet the consistency between the Hills' independent accounts adds weight to their testimony. Researchers and psychologists have debated these recollections extensively, examining factors such as stress, sleep patterns, and cultural influences. It is noteworthy that the Hills were not immersed in science fiction narratives at the time, suggesting that their recollections were not simply the product of imaginative storytelling. Dr. Simon himself observed a sense of consistency and sincerity in their accounts, noting that both individuals appeared genuinely surprised and sometimes confused by the details they recalled. The calm, methodical way they described the events enhances credibility, offering the audience an opportunity to engage with the narrative thoughtfully rather than sensationally. Equally important is the gentle way in which the Hills' story was communicated. The hypnosis sessions were conducted with care, in a controlled environment, emphasizing recollection rather than dramatic performance. This approach allowed the events to be shared without exaggeration, preserving a quiet authenticity that is essential to the storytelling style suited for bedtime listening. The narrative is not about shock or fear. It is about wonder, reflection, and the delicate awareness of something beyond ordinary experience. Every description, from the color of the lights aboard the craft to the meticulous movements of the beings, is presented in measured detail, encouraging the listener to notice, imagine, and reflect, rather than to be startled. The examination itself, as recalled by the Hills, also raises questions about perception, memory, and the human mind's capacity to integrate the extraordinary. Betty noted a combination of sensory impressions, touch, sight, and subtle emotional tones, while Barney focused on the spatial arrangement of the environment and the presence of otherworldly observation. Both experienced a sense of time that was altered, with minutes feeling stretched or compressed, a phenomenon often reported in accounts of unusual experiences. These details invite reflection on the nature of consciousness and awareness, reminding the audience that the human mind is capable of encountering profound mystery in ways that are subtle, complex, and deeply personal. The pacing of the story mirrors this psychological unfolding, allowing listeners to drift gently alongside the Hills as they navigate the uncharted terrain of perception. In addition to the sensory and spatial aspects, the Hills also describe the experience as emotionally neutral, marked by curiosity rather than fear. There was no sense of immediate threat or malice, only observation and examination. This unusual emotional tone contributes to the story's calm pacing, enabling the audience to engage with the narrative in a reflective, meditative manner. The contrast between the extraordinary visual and psychological elements and the steady, measured emotional response underscores the unique nature of the encounter. It is not a story of panic, but of attentive observation under circumstances that challenge the ordinary understanding of reality. Finally, it is important to recognize that the Hills' recollections under hypnosis became a cornerstone for UFO research and cultural interest in alien abduction phenomena. Their testimony, while still debated, established a framework for understanding how ordinary individuals might encounter the extraordinary and attempt to integrate such experiences into their lives. For the listener, this section of the story is both immersive and contemplative, offering the opportunity to consider the interplay between perception, memory, and the unknown. It gently guides the audience into the next phase of exploration, the public, governmental, and cultural responses that would follow, showing how a quiet night drive became a narrative that continues to ripple through decades of inquiry, imagination, and fascination. In the months following the Hills' unusual experience, their story began to attract attention beyond the quiet roads and forests of New Hampshire. Initially, the recollections under hypnosis were private, shared only with their psychiatrist, Dr. Benjamin Simon, as a means of understanding their fragmented memories. Yet as the details unfolded, it became clear that their account was unlike anything previously documented. The unusual clarity and consistency of their memories, coupled with the ordinary nature of the witnesses themselves, made the story both compelling and worthy of attention from researchers, journalists, and eventually government officials. The quiet, reflective curiosity that had marked the Hill's own approach now extended outward, reaching the broader societal stage, where skepticism, investigation, and fascination would intermingle. The official attention came in several forms, each adding a layer of context and complexity to the narrative. Project Blue Book, the United States Air Force's systematic investigation into UFO reports, became a reference point for evaluating the Hill's account. While many cases examined by Blue Book were resolved as misidentified conventional phenomena, the Hill's report stood out due to its detailed chronology, multiple witnesses, and hypnotically recovered memories. Air Force investigators carefully documented the incident, noting the geographical coordinates of the sightings, the estimated size and movement of the lights, and the consistency of the couple's testimony. Although Project Blue Book ultimately did not conclude that an extraterrestrial craft had been involved, official records reflect a recognition of the case's unusual and unexplained elements, lending a subtle credibility that persists to this day. Media coverage played a complementary role in shaping public awareness of the Hill's encounter. Newspapers, radio programs, and later television segments began reporting on the incident, often balancing the extraordinary nature of the account with cautious skepticism. Headlines sometimes emphasized mystery, yet many reports included detailed descriptions of the witnesses' backgrounds, their reliability, and the methods used to recover memories under hypnosis. These contextual details were crucial, grounding the story in a sense of reality while inviting the public to contemplate the possibility of unexplained phenomena. For the audience, the combination of media reporting and government attention reinforces the dual layers of observation and reflection, allowing the story to resonate without resorting to sensationalism. Skepticism was, of course, an integral part of the response. Experts in psychology, aviation, and astronomy offered potential explanations ranging from misidentified celestial objects to psychological stress or sleep disturbances. Some argued that the Hill's memories could have been influenced by subconscious expectations or cultural factors, while others pointed to the limitations of hypnosis as a memory recovery tool. These critiques, however, did not dismiss the case outright. Rather, they highlighted the careful balance required in evaluating extraordinary claims. The presence of reasoned skepticism adds depth to the narrative, reminding listeners that human perception is complex, and that the Hill's experiences, while unusual, were documented thoughtfully and systematically. This blend of inquiry and contemplation mirrors the pacing of a calm, immersive story, where curiosity and critical thinking coexist gently. The Hills themselves remained remarkably composed in the face of growing attention. They provided interviews, recounted their experiences consistently, and emphasized that their story was not intended to frighten but to document what had occurred. Their calm demeanor, coupled with detailed recollections, contributed to a perception of authenticity that contrasted with more sensationalized UFO reports. This measured approach allowed researchers and the public alike to engage with the account thoughtfully, examining both the unusual phenomena and the human experience of encountering the inexplicable. For the listener, this reinforces a sense of safety and reflection, permitting immersion in the mystery without alarm. Government files and interviews also revealed interesting nuances. While some investigators approached the case skeptically, others expressed genuine curiosity, noting the difficulty in explaining the movements of the lights or the consistency of the witnesses' memories. Reports included observations about the estimated speed and altitude of the objects, their apparent intelligence, and the manner in which they seemed to track the Hill's vehicle. Each of these details was carefully recorded, creating a mosaic of information that continues to inform UFO researchers and cultural historians. The attention given by authorities, while measured and cautious, reinforces the sense that this was not merely a fanciful tale, but an incident worthy of study, further deepening the audience's engagement with the story. At the same time, media portrayals helped shape the cultural impact of the Hill's experience. While newspapers and magazines reported the details, The broader public began to conceptualize the incident within the emerging framework of alien abductions and unexplained phenomena. Stories appeared in both mainstream and specialty publications, contributing to a slow cultural acknowledgement of UFO encounters as a legitimate topic of curiosity. Scholars later noted that the Hill's account marked a turning point. It was among the first widely publicized incidents in which ordinary, credible witnesses described a detailed abduction scenario, complete with observation, study, and interaction. This dual lens, government documentation and media portrayal, offers a rich landscape for reflection, illustrating how ordinary events intersect with extraordinary claims to shape both research and imagination. For listeners, the interplay between official investigation and media coverage creates a rhythm that is both calming and intriguing. The narrative is slow, deliberate, and structured, allowing time to absorb the significance of each report, observation, and response. Rather than being rushed toward conclusions, the audience is invited to notice the meticulous care with which details were documented, the thoughtful skepticism applied, and the quiet persistence of curiosity that drove the investigations forward. This pacing mirrors the Hill's own experience, attentive, reflective, and deeply human, underscoring that encounters with mystery are not always loud or dramatic, but can unfold gently, quietly, and profoundly. Ultimately, the attention from government and media reinforced the Hill's story as both credible and compelling. It established a foundation for later research, popular interest, and cultural significance. Yet, as is often the case with the unexplained, no singular conclusion was reached, leaving room for interpretation, contemplation, and ongoing inquiry. For the audience, this open-endedness is part of the allure, inviting both intellectual engagement and meditative reflection. The calm, measured exploration of these responses sets the stage for the next phase of the story: the alternative theories, psychological interpretations, and paranormal perspectives that would continue to shape the legacy of the Hill's extraordinary encounter. As the Hill's account gained attention from both the public and officials, a wide array of interpretations began to emerge, each attempting to explain the extraordinary events that had unfolded that night. Some experts turned first to psychology, exploring how human perception and memory might shape experiences of the unknown. The Hills were ordinary, attentive individuals with strong observational skills, yet even careful observers are subject to subtle influences. Researchers proposed that stress, fatigue, or the unusual conditions of late-night travel could have played a role in shaping their perceptions. Hypnosis, while a valuable tool for memory recovery, is also known to sometimes influence the mind's reconstruction of events, weaving imagination, subconscious expectations, and partial recollections into a coherent, vivid narrative. These explanations, however, did not diminish the richness of the experience. Instead, they offer a lens through which to gently reflect on the interplay between perception and reality. Sleep-related phenomena were also considered as potential explanations. Episodes such as sleep paralysis or lucid dreaming can produce experiences that feel remarkably real, sometimes accompanied by visual hallucinations and heightened emotional awareness. In the case of the Hills, the subtle tension, the altered perception of time, and the vivid imagery recalled under hypnosis have led some researchers to suggest that a combination of stress, fatigue, and unusual sleep patterns might have contributed to the reconstructed memories. Yet the extraordinary alignment between Betty and Barney's independent recollections presents a puzzle. Why would two individuals, experiencing what might be a dreamlike state, produce accounts so consistent in detail, timing, and emotional tone? This question continues to intrigue psychologists and UFO researchers alike, demonstrating that the mind's capacity for both perception and imagination is as profound as the mysteries it seeks to understand. Cultural context also played a role in shaping interpretations. The early 1960s were rich with stories of flying saucers, mysterious lights, and extraterrestrial life, appearing in books, newspapers, and films. While the Hills themselves were not immersed in this culture to the extent of consciously shaping their memories, the cultural milieu cannot be entirely separated from human cognition. Some researchers argue that the themes and imagery present in popular media may subtly influence the way extraordinary experiences are remembered or described. Yet the specificity of the Hill's account, the star maps, the clinical nature of the observations, and the behavioral details of the beings transcends the general tropes of science fiction, suggesting a narrative that is both unique and deeply grounded in personal perception. This delicate balance between influence and originality adds a rich layer of reflection for the listener, encouraging calm contemplation rather than quick judgment. Alternative interpretations extended beyond psychology into the realm of the unexplained, including theories of extraterrestrial visitation. Some researchers, historians, and UFO enthusiasts argue that the Hill's detailed and consistent accounts point to the possibility of contact with beings from beyond Earth. The descriptions of small, humanoid figures with large, dark eyes, combined with methodical observation and the use of instruments, align with other reports in the emerging field of alien abduction research. While these ideas cannot be confirmed through conventional scientific methods, they provide a compelling framework for exploring human curiosity and the perception of the unknown. The gentle intrigue of these possibilities, when presented thoughtfully, allows the audience to engage with mystery without fear, maintaining the calm, immersive tone that characterizes reflective storytelling. Some theorists also explored more esoteric or paranormal perspectives. Could the encounter reflect phenomena beyond the physical, perhaps glimpses of realities or dimensions not yet fully understood? Accounts of subtle interactions, lights that seemed aware of the Hill's presence, moments of altered time perception, and the calm demeanor of the beings, invite speculation that goes beyond conventional physics. Researchers in parapsychology have noted parallels between abduction experiences and other phenomena, such as near-death experiences or lucid dreamlike states, suggesting that human consciousness might interact with dimensions of reality that are normally inaccessible. These interpretations, while highly speculative, emphasize contemplation and curiosity rather than alarm, reinforcing the meditative quality of the story. The listener is encouraged to consider the vastness of human experience and the quiet mysteries that linger at the edge of perception. It is also instructive to consider the ethical and observational dimensions of the Hill's experience. Both Betty and Barney emphasized the observational nature of the encounter rather than feelings of threat or aggression. The beings appeared focused, methodical, and even clinical in their actions, raising questions about the purpose and intelligence behind the phenomena. Alternative theories attempt to make sense of these behaviors. Were they an experiment, a form of communication, or a subtle observation of human reactions? Each interpretation adds texture to the narrative, inviting the listener to reflect on the possible intentions behind experiences that defy conventional explanation. The calm, descriptive tone allows these reflections to be both engaging and soothing, fostering a sense of wonder without urgency. Researchers also debated the role of memory and narrative construction in the Hill's story. The mind does not record events like a camera. It interprets, organizes, and sometimes embellishes experiences to create coherence. Hypnosis, while unlocking memories, also interacts with these interpretive processes, potentially introducing subtle influences. Yet the Hill's accounts exhibit remarkable consistency, detail, and a shared understanding that is difficult to dismiss. This combination of ordinary observation, extraordinary experience, and thoughtful reflection presents a rich tapestry for contemplation. It encourages the listener to consider the mysteries of consciousness, the reliability of memory, and the subtle ways human perception navigates the boundary between the known and the unknown. Finally, the broader cultural and social response to alternative interpretations is part of the story itself. Scholars, enthusiasts, and casual observers alike grappled with the Hill's account, balancing skepticism with fascination. Their story became a reference point in debates about alien abduction, human cognition, and the limits of perception. By presenting multiple perspectives, psychological, paranormal, and extraterrestrial, The narrative acknowledges the complexity of interpreting extraordinary experiences while maintaining a gentle, reflective pace. Listeners are invited to consider each theory thoughtfully, moving slowly through curiosity and contemplation, rather than rushing toward judgment or sensationalism. This careful framing ensures that the story remains immersive, calming, and intellectually engaging, honoring both the mystery and the humanity of the Hill's encounter. In the end, these alternative theories, whether psychological, cultural, or paranormal, do not seek to resolve the mystery entirely. Instead, they provide frameworks for reflection, avenues for curiosity, and layers of understanding that enrich the story. The listener is encouraged to inhabit a space of calm observation, noticing the interplay between ordinary perception and extraordinary experience, between rational analysis and wonder. The Hill's encounter remains a quiet invitation to explore the unknown, to meditate on the boundaries of human understanding, and to engage with mystery as both a contemplative and deeply human experience. In this way, the narrative continues to unfold gently, preparing the audience to appreciate its cultural influence, historical significance, and the continuing mysteries that follow. The story of Betty and Barney Hill did not end with the quiet roads of New Hampshire or the private recollections recovered under hypnosis. Over time, their experience became a touchstone for a broader cultural understanding of UFO phenomena and alien abduction narratives. The Hills' account was one of the first widely publicized abduction cases in which ordinary, credible witnesses described intricate, detailed encounters. This alone captured public attention, offering a bridge between everyday life and the possibility of the extraordinary. Their story resonated precisely because it was neither sensationalized nor dramatized. It was a carefully observed, thoughtfully recounted series of events that blurred the line between reality and mystery, inviting both reflection and imagination. In the decades following the initial reports, the Hills' story influenced research, media, and public perception in profound ways. UFO researchers and historians often cite the case as a model for studying abduction phenomena. A detailed chronology, multiple witnesses, and corroborated details that allowed for both psychological and scientific examination. The famous star map Betty attempted to recreate became a focal point of investigation, with astronomers analyzing its layout in search of potential explanations or correlations with real celestial patterns. While conclusions remain speculative, the existence of such a concrete artifact within an otherwise subjective experience grounded the story in a tangible way, adding layers of intrigue and credibility. This blending of ordinary observation with unusual phenomena created a narrative that transcended a single moment in time, embedding itself into the collective consciousness. Media portrayals further amplified the Hills' influence. Books, television programs, documentaries, and later fictional adaptations drew inspiration from the couple's account, often emphasizing the calm, methodical nature of their observations. Unlike many contemporary UFO stories that relied on dramatization or fear, the Hills' narrative offered a contemplative, reflective framework. Audiences were invited to follow the story slowly, noting details of perception, emotional nuance, and the subtle interactions between witnesses and the unknown. This measured approach allowed the tale to resonate with a wide range of viewers and readers, from casual enthusiasts to serious researchers, and even those simply curious about the mysteries of the night sky. The narrative's pacing, reflective tone, and attention to detail became a template for later storytelling in both nonfiction and fiction, demonstrating how one case could influence cultural expression on multiple levels. Beyond media, the Hills' account also contributed to the development of a broader social framework for understanding unexplained phenomena. Their story highlighted the idea that ordinary individuals could encounter extraordinary events, challenging assumptions about who might witness the unknown. This accessibility encouraged others to report their own experiences, creating a growing repository of anecdotal evidence and observations that could be studied comparatively. Researchers began to categorize experiences, examine recurring themes, and explore the psychological and sociological dimensions of UFO encounters. The Hills narrative, as both a case study and a cultural artifact, provided a foundation for these explorations, bridging scientific inquiry with the imagination and curiosity of the public. The cultural influence extended even further into the realm of psychological and educational discourse. Scholars used the Hills story to discuss the nature of memory, perception, and consciousness, exploring how extraordinary experiences could be interpreted through multiple lenses: rational, psychological, and imaginative. Their calm demeanor, clear recollections, and willingness to participate in investigative studies made the couple ideal subjects for ongoing discussion and analysis. By examining their story with care and attention, both professionals and enthusiasts could explore the subtle boundaries between ordinary cognition and the extraordinary, enriching the cultural narrative surrounding UFOs, abduction phenomena, and human curiosity. The Hills encounter became a quiet reminder that the mind is capable of perceiving and processing mysteries in ways that are both deeply personal and socially resonant. Even decades later, the story maintains a presence in popular culture, scientific discussion, and UFO research. Conferences, documentaries, and scholarly articles continue to reference the Hills, often noting the consistency of their testimony and the calm manner in which they reported the events. Their experience has become emblematic of a careful, methodical approach to extraordinary claims, demonstrating that engagement with mystery does not require fear or sensationalism but can instead foster reflection, curiosity, and a meditative sense of wonder. For those who explore the story today, it serves as both a historical record and a contemplative invitation, encouraging audiences to consider the unknown gently, thoughtfully, and without alarm. The lasting significance of the Hills story lies not only in its content but also in its structure and tone. The narrative provides a model for how extraordinary events can be recounted in ways that are accessible, credible, and calming. It demonstrates that mystery does not need to be loud or dramatic to capture the imagination. Subtlety, attention to detail, and reflective pacing can be equally compelling. For audiences seeking both information and a sense of quiet intrigue, the Hills account remains a touchstone, illustrating how ordinary people can encounter phenomena that challenge understanding while still maintaining a sense of calm, observation, and wonder. Their experience, carefully documented and widely discussed, continues to resonate as a story that bridges human perception, cultural fascination, and the ever-present allure of the unknown. Finally, the Hills narrative encourages a broader contemplation of human curiosity itself. Their encounter, meticulously observed and thoughtfully recounted, invites listeners to consider the boundaries of knowledge, the subtle interplay between perception and reality, and the quiet moments in which the extraordinary might reveal itself. For those listening under the calm veil of night, the story fosters both relaxation and reflection, encouraging an awareness of the mysteries that surround ordinary life. The cultural legacy of Betty and Barney Hill is therefore not only about UFOs or abduction phenomena, it is also a meditation on wonder, attention, and the gentle unfolding of extraordinary experiences in the quiet spaces of the everyday world. In the decades that followed Betty and Barney Hill's strange encounter on that quiet New Hampshire road, researchers, skeptics, and believers have continued to return to their story, each time with new questions, new tools, and new interpretations. Modern investigations have approached the case with technologies and scientific methods far beyond what was available in the early 1960s. Astronomers, data analysts, and UFO researchers have examined everything from archived radar data to astronomical alignments, seeking to understand what could have been in the night sky that autumn evening. Yet even with advanced knowledge of satellite trajectories, meteor patterns, and aircraft routes, no conventional explanation fully fits the details the Hills described. That tension between what can be measured and what remains uncertain keeps their story alive, quietly glowing at the edge of understanding. One of the most studied pieces of evidence remains Betty Hill's so-called star map, drawn under hypnosis from memory. For decades, it has been analyzed, debated, and reinterpreted. Some have suggested it resembles the star system of Zeta Reticuli, while others believe it reflects nothing more than an imagined configuration shaped by stress and suggestion. The map itself has become almost symbolic, an emblem of human curiosity stretched across the unknown. Modern astronomers use advanced mapping software to compare Betty's drawing with known constellations, yet no consensus has emerged. What endures is the symbolic beauty of that act. A woman reaching toward the stars, trying to translate an impossible vision into something others could understand. Psychological and cognitive sciences have also revisited the Hill's experience, offering nuanced insights into how memory and perception operate under extraordinary circumstances. Modern research into trauma and suggestibility reveals that under intense stress, the mind can record fragments of truth and imagination together, blending the external world with inner response. Yet despite decades of such studies, the Hill's recollections remain remarkably consistent and detailed, especially when examined independently. Their voices on the original hypnosis tapes, steady, emotional, and deeply sincere, suggest not fabrication, but the enduring puzzle of two people describing something they genuinely experienced, even if what it was remains uncertain. For many listeners, this balance between conviction and mystery is precisely what makes the story so quietly haunting. Technological reevaluations have also deepened the intrigue. Military and FAA records have been re-examined in the digital age, searching for radar anomalies on the night in question. Analysts have found no definitive evidence of foreign aircraft, but some records show unusual readings, brief, unexplained radar blips that remain unaccounted for. The U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book, which investigated the Hill's report, concluded without finding proof of extraterrestrial involvement. Still, even the official language, acknowledging the case as unexplained, leaves space for lingering questions. These questions are not alarming, but quietly compelling, like ripples on a dark lake that never fully settle. Culturally, the Hill's case has become a cornerstone for how abduction narratives are understood today. Scholars in sociology and folklore point to it as the first widely publicized example of a modern UFO abduction, one that shaped how future accounts would be described and received. Yet beyond its influence, the story endures because of its humanity. It is not the tale of fame seekers or dramatists, but of two ordinary people, Betty, a social worker, and Barney, a postal employee, trying to make sense of something extraordinary. Their honesty, restraint, and measured responses continue to distinguish their case even among skeptics. Today, with the rise of new government programs like the Pentagon's UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, task forces, the Hill's encounter feels oddly contemporary again. Each new report or declassified file invites comparisons, reminding us that even in a data-rich world, mystery persists. The Hill's story has become less about proving or disproving aliens, and more about the deeper experience of witnessing the unexplainable. It is a story about human perception, resilience, and curiosity, a calm reminder that wonder itself has value, even when answers remain elusive. As modern investigators continue to revisit the Hill's night on Route 3, the case stands as a quiet monument to the meeting point between science and mystery. Each new theory adds a brushstroke to the larger picture, yet the full image remains softly incomplete. And perhaps that is where its beauty lies, in its endurance, its balance between explanation and enigma. For listeners, it is a story that encourages peaceful curiosity, inviting the imagination to rest in the delicate space between what we know and what we still dare to wonder about beneath the vast, starlit sky. As we reach the quiet conclusion of Betty and Barney Hill's extraordinary journey, it is important to allow the mind to linger gently on the mysteries they encountered. Their experience, observed with care, recounted with calm, and preserved with remarkable consistency, reminds us that the world often contains moments that defy ordinary explanation. The lights in the New Hampshire sky, the beings described under hypnosis, and the intricate star map are not merely elements of a story, they are invitations to reflect on the delicate boundaries between perception, memory, and the unknown. Even decades later, their encounter continues to spark curiosity, inspiring researchers, storytellers, and ordinary listeners alike to consider the possibility that reality may hold layers beyond what is immediately visible. There is a serene lesson in the Hill's story. Encounters with the extraordinary need not evoke fear or alarm. Observation, calm reflection, and attentive curiosity allow humans to engage with mystery in ways that are contemplative, insightful, and quietly profound. As we imagine the hills on that forested road, noticing each subtle movement of light, feeling the gentle tension of the unknown, we are invited to practice a similar awareness in our own lives, to notice details, to remain open to wonder, and to embrace the quiet spaces where curiosity can flourish. Ultimately, the Hill's experience endures because it balances the ordinary with the extraordinary, the real with the mysterious, and the observable with the unknowable. It is a story of careful attention, measured reflection, and enduring fascination. As the night settles, and the mind drifts toward rest, we carry with us a gentle reminder. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved immediately, but to be savored, contemplated, and allowed to expand the quiet horizons of imagination and awareness. The tale of Betty and Barney Hill lingers softly, a whisper of wonder beneath the stars, inviting both relaxation and reverent curiosity.